Okay, hello and welcome, for real this time, to the Michigan Spinal Cord Injury Model Systems Presents Facebook Live series. Today we will be talking about adaptive sports. My name is Dr. Michelle Meade, and I am PI and Director of the Michigan Spinal Cord Injury Model Systems. The Michigan SCI Model Systems, for those who are not aware, represents an exciting collaboration between the University of Michigan and Michigan Medicine with Mary Free Bed Rehabilitation Hospital. We are both organizations passionate about both advancing the health and wellness of individuals living with spinal cord injury, as well as ensuring their health, their adaptive recreation activities. The Michigan Spinal Cord Injury Model Systems is funded by a federal grant from the National Institute of Disability Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research, which is in the Administration for Community Living. Today's session features Dr. Joanathan VandenBerg, who is a co-PI and site director from the Mary Free Bed Rehabilitation Hospital. He will be serving as the moderator for this live Facebook presentation. So what that means in practical terms is that as you watch, and if you're excited, please share it with your friends so that they can also jump on and appreciate it as well. The event is being recorded and will be available on archive from our website. Please also tweet about this, and that information will be in the chat. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. VandenBerg, who will introduce himself and get us started in learning about this important topic. John?
You're muted.
Sorry about that.
You're still muted.
Still muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Michelle. And it's finally a pleasure to be here with all of my co-panelists. I'm so honored to be a moderator for today's discussion. And I'm so thankful to have all the backup of my co-panelists because they have a ton of information and a ton of resources at their fingertips that give people access to things that they want to do and fun, whether that be outdoors, whether that be on the court, or around their community. So my thoughts and how I kind of got into wheelchair and adaptive sports was when I was in high school. I was introduced to wheelchair tennis, and I started coming out to wheelchair tennis practices, playing with the team, going out for Buffalo Wild Wings post-practice, and just had a lot of fun. And I continued that through college and even after college, working with Grand Valley's college tennis team, as well as the Grand Rapids wheelchair sports and tennis team, which then eventually became Mary Free Bed Wheelchair and Adaptive Sports. And then just recently, we developed a partnership with Michigan Model Systems and University of Michigan, and are so proud of that partnership and excited for what our combined systems are able to offer people around the state for their health and wellness, and integrating into the community and optimizing people's independence, decreasing hospitalizations, as people who get out and do recreation and adaptive sports have been shown to improve their quality of life, but also improve their health. So some of my thoughts in terms of medical management and of spinal cord injury include encouraging people to get out and remain active. And some of the things that we're going to talk about today really allow access for people at a community level, at a recreational level, at a more advanced level. And there's plenty of opportunity around our state from both University of Michigan and Mary Free Bed to get involved. We'll get into some more of the nitty gritty in a little bit, but first I'd like to introduce some of our panelists. So if we can go to the next slide. So we're going to start by introducing each one, and then they'll give about a minute or two spiel on kind of what they do and involved in wheelchair sports and recreation, and then we'll kind of go into some of our main discussion topics. Some of the main discussion topics for today are kind of highlight the wide variety of sports that we offer, talk about who can play and accessibility, the breadth of community programs, and a little bit about national structure and how to get involved, and then some of the costs associated with adaptive sports and what options are available for adaptive equipment. And then we'll also be available for any questions. If you want to post them to the Q&A, feel free. We'll be monitoring that and address them when we can. So first, I'm going to start off with Maria Besta, who's the manager of recreational therapy, wheelchair and adaptive sports at Mary Free Bed. And Maria, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. I have been manager of Mary Free Bed's Wheelchair and Adaptive Sports Department for the past 21 years. I'm a recreational therapist for 33. That tells you how old I am. And I also manage the inpatient recreational therapy department, as well as music and art therapy at Mary Free Bed. All are great segues into wheelchair and adaptive sports. And I've been involved in wheelchair and adaptive sports since the beginning of my career. So I'm happy to be here and to share a little bit about what we offer.
Thank you. And now Pat Besta, he's an engineer and adaptive sports athlete. He also owns a DME company. And for the last 20 years, he's sold and fixed everyday sport wheelchairs. He's played numerous wheelchair sports for the last 30 years, including basketball. I've battled with him on the tennis court, softball, pickleball, and lacrosse.
All right. So I was in a motor vehicle accident about 33 years ago. So I'm a T11 para. I was a design engineer for quite a few years, and then kind of you can see just what John said. I play all these different sports. So I kind of I guess I'm kind of a professional recruiter because I'm always recruiting people. Every time I see them, I say, hey, you want to play some sports? You want to play sports? And so I think sports have been really good as far as getting people, you kind of around people your same disabilities and everything. You just talk about different things. So it's a really good thing. I think it's great for people to be into the sports. It's really about it on me, I guess.
Thank you. And now Jocelyn Dettloff, she's a major gifts director at Mary Free Bed Foundation and also an adaptive sports athlete, advocate, author of It Rained in the Desert, One Woman's Story of Spirit and Resilience. And I have also battled with her on the tennis court.
Thank you, John. Yes, it's been, we've known you for quite a while. I have a T5 complete spinal cord injury, and I have been in a chair for 26 years. And I have tried a variety of adaptive sports. I've done water skiing, downhill skiing, scuba diving, golf. I mean, I guess you could say kayaking, although that's not really adaptive, but the opportunities in Grand Rapids have been incredible for the breadth and the depth of the programs that Mary Free Bed offers. And to kind of what Pat said, adaptive sports are for people who use chairs, but then they can also be for people who are amputees and not everyday chair users. So I appreciate being part of this panel and educating people about what's out there, because sports are really great just to unite people.
Wonderful. And now Becky McVeigh is a supervisory recreational therapist from the Department of PM&R and Michigan Medicine and a board member of UMAIS, the University of Michigan Adaptive Inclusion Sports Experience. And Becky, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Becky McVeigh. I've been a recreational therapist since 1995. I'll let you guys do the math out there. and I've been at Michigan Medicine since 2001. We started UMAIS in 2017, basically because of a need in the Ann Arbor community. There was nothing in the Ann Arbor community for people who needed adaptive and inclusive sports from all age points. So we were lucky enough to get a grant and get it started, and it's just kind of exploded from there. So I'm just really, really excited to be a part of it. I have some wonderful colleagues that I'm working with on the board, and it's really been a wonderful trajectory.
Wonderful. And then Dr. Melissa Tinney is a clinical assistant professor of physical medicine and rehab at Michigan Medicine, and also a board member for UMAIS. And Dr. Tinney, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Melissa Tinney. I am a physical medicine and rehab physician. I also clinically teach residents in training in PM&R, and my exposure to adaptive sports was really as a clinical provider. I started my career, I did my training at University of Michigan, but I started my career with the VA in West Virginia, where I treated a lot of veterans coming back and forth for multiple deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. So really that's where I began really getting exposure and understanding how I could support people in their recovery from their injuries, and also making sure that they had the resources and support they needed to continue activities that they wanted to pursue. And so I kind of learned along with my patients, and really it has been just a wonderful thing to be part of. So I've continued that work, serving on the national medical team for the National Veteran Wheelchair Games since 2017. And I also am one of the members of UMAIS, where I joined faculty at the University of Michigan in 2018. And I'm really happy to be beginning medical support this fall for the Collegiate University of Michigan Adaptive Sports and Fitness Program. So really being able to see the journey from all levels is really just, I want to encourage people that you can kind of enter the space at any level.
Very nice. So obviously we have a very experienced panel here in terms of wheelchair and adaptive sports. And I guess that brings us to what is currently offered from our programs. And this is a huge question. And so I'll try and narrow it down a little bit. In terms of programs and accessibility, how many people do we have currently participating, and how many different programs does say, we'll start with you, Maria, have at Mary Free Bed? Take it from there.
Okay, well, Mary Free Bed, we're fortunate to have a very robust program. We serve over 2,000 individuals. We have over 42 programs, and we cover the gamut from sports for people who have a physical disability, who want to be competitive, maybe have socialization, but mostly they want to be able to get back to playing a sport, or maybe they're introduced to something that they a new way of playing a sport, or introduced to a new sport that maybe they didn't play before they were injured or obtained an injury. And then we also have classes, which are 6-week-long programs, that anything from we have a youth sports sampler, so kids between the ages of 3 and 7 can learn how to use their wheelchair to play sports. We have exercise classes, adaptive yoga classes, swim lessons, and then we have clinics, which are a 1-time or 2-time opportunity or experience that someone can have throughout the year. So we might have a scuba diving clinic, we have downhill snow ski clinic, water ski clinic, sailing clinics, and these are opportunities for people to either try to participate and learn how they can do that on their own, or maybe it's just something they want to do once or twice a year and they come and join us for these programs. We also have special events. We have a wheelchair sports camp that happens every summer. It's coming up at the end of July. And that is a camp with about 50 kids who have physical disabilities, who are learning how to play sports, or who are just getting involved with other kids who have similar disabilities, and all of the instructors are in wheelchairs themselves. So it's a great experience because it's more than just the sport. So I always talk about that with our programs, that playing sports playing the sport is a big deal, but it's a lot more about an organic, natural support that it offers. And it gives people a chance to feel confident about who they are. Some of our athletes never would have left the state without the support of playing sports through Mary Free Bed, because we travel all over the United States. You can't play the next city over in wheelchair basketball. You have to go out of state oftentimes, or wheelchair tennis, to get in games. And so you're traveling, you're meeting new people, you're learning from others who use wheelchairs on how to drive a car, how to transfer. So all the skills they would have learned in inpatient, they're taking out into wheelchair and adaptive sports.
That's, yeah, totally. And just to, I guess, piggyback off of that, once you get your foot into the door with one program, it kind of opens that door to a whole nother realm of things that you didn't even know about. And I know that when I started with wheelchair tennis, that opened the door to quad rugby, to basketball, and just the skiing, whole other world that was just super exciting for me, and I think offers so many opportunities.
That's
Go ahead.
that's one of the problems that we have, is that we offer so many programs. The same people are playing all of them, because once they play one sport, they're pretty confident to play all of the sports. And then it kind of like dilutes everything that we're offering, because everybody wants to play everything all at the same time. So it's a good problem to have, but still, we're always trying to recruit new people.
Totally.
And
then back.
There's
go ahead.
a question related to that. Do you have to have been an athlete or prior to your injury to participate in wheelchair sports or adaptive?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And this could be the beginning for somebody who maybe never played sports, but now that they have a new injury and a new way of life, they're thinking, oh, I want to try some of these things. I think Pat could probably talk about that. That's how he started playing tennis.
So a lot of people that join, I think almost most of them, they've never played sports before. So one of the things I coach little kids in basketball, like usually 7 to 13-year-olds. And then I also coach our adult teams, and probably 3/4 of our adults, if not even more than that's never even played basketball before. So they just want to get out there and try it. And it's just different. And that's the same with the little kids. Little kids, when they first get out there, it's mostly, I think they just want to be around other little kids in wheelchairs with the same kind of a disability. So they think they do it more as a social thing, like especially sports camp. They're all going there more for the social part more than the sports, but it's kind of integrated in with it. And it's a lot better to have them playing the sports, I think, than playing video games all day or something like that. So but yeah, you definitely don't have to be professional when you come in to play.
Well, to piggyback on that, the video games, I mean, are you looking at cyber sports? Because that's become pretty big, and I don't want to downplay that. That's it's pretty cool, and there are it's a growing part of recreation, is video games, and it serves a lot of different populations. So I think that's also very exciting. But I want to hop over to Becky to talk about some of the
Sure.
excitement over at UMaze.
Yeah, and actually, we do have a rehab engineer who's on our board of directors, and another recreational therapist who is an ATP. So they have been working together on the cyber sports. So that's kind of an aside. That's something that we're definitely working a lot with our higher level spinal cord patients. And who have also kind of working on that continuum, who are now outpatients coming back into the clinic to work with all the equipment. So they're using a grant to do that, which is really exciting. That's something that I'm definitely not in my realm, because I have no talent in that area, but they do. So that's good. But speaking of our programs, like I said, we're a young program. We're feisty. We've started in 2017, and then, had a little COVID thrown in there, but we, still kept growing. So we're up to 14 programs right now, which I think is pretty good for 4, board members running it, and, a lot of volunteers. And so we're able to really kind of hone in on what the community is kind of asking for. So we started out with a kayaking program. We have some really nice adaptive kayaks. We're able to do downriver trips now. We have a competitive junior team for wheelchair basketball that we're gonna, enter back into the field now that they've kind of recouped after COVID. And then we have a whole list of other things like we've started pickleball and we started all of these other things. I won't go through the whole list of 14 activities that we do, but we also do see a lot of we do see spinal cord injury, but we also in other physical disabilities, but we have also seen people come through like adults who have autism. And that was just a huge need in our Ann Arbor community, it turned out. So we, as UMAIS, decided that was a need we needed to meet. So we met that need as well. So UMAIS is really about figuring out where that continuum is, and it may not be always where we think it's going to be. So like we may think that we're going to program for this spinal cord or stroke or amputee, and it turns out it's autism or some other cognitive disability. So we've really been enjoying problem solving that for our community, so that everybody is able to come to the playing field literally and participate in sport and recreation.
That's great.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I guess we'll move on to kind of the next topic, which is who can play.
And John, just a quick question here before you move on. There's a question that asking, are cyber sports the same thing as esports?
I would say pretty much. I'm not super familiar with the different nomenclature for cyber sports, but I think it is a really exciting space. And I know I've talked to people with spinal cord injury who are looking at building programs both at University of Michigan and in Grand Rapids at Mary Free Bed. And we have a couple of units that we bring around the inpatient unit for people who are currently hospitalized with adaptive controllers and that sort of thing. And looking at developing more of a almost support group / community group that we can have like LAN parties. LAN parties are back in the day when we all used to connect our computers together. But having a room, as we're currently building a new pediatric hospital, to support that sort of thing would be awesome. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure on the nomenclature, but it's video games. So I guess I'll ask a couple of the other panelists. When you're, say, in the clinic, Dr. Tinney, who are you encouraging to get out and play adaptive sports or participate in recreational therapy?
I would say that really, I try not to have any bias of who is an athlete, or if somebody self-identifies as I'm an athlete or I'm not into sports. I really try to encourage, an open mind, and even my colleagues, or as I'm teaching another provider about who would you recommend, you should recommend it to everybody, really, because we do have our own biases about, what we think might happen or what is expected. What I like was mentioned from a couple of the panelists about, this definition of an athlete. One of the things we always talk about is, everyone's an athlete. There is some part of us that wants to, engage in physical activity to some level. Maybe it is esports, maybe it's a court sport, maybe it's enjoying nature, and the breadth of programming that was just described really allows for that. I always also try not to self-select to say, I try to get an idea of somebody's goals or what they might be interested in. So if somebody is a more, introverted personality, maybe they don't want to be in a team. Maybe they can't be on a team logistically. So, depending on where they live, it might be a solitary pursuit like hand cycling, thinking about where the person is at in their environment and what is, the most functional and feasible for them. I try to think about that too. So I think that those ideas. And the other thing that I like that Maria had mentioned was clinics versus committing to seasons or series of sports. Somebody might be hesitant to sign up if they think, oh, I can't commit to like a whole team and all these practices. I've got too much going on, or I can't have somebody transporting me every single time. One-off clinics really allow for just exposure, experience, and maybe a little bit of independence for maybe that person and their family to pursue it. We love that when people kind of graduate from our programs and have new people come in, because that means that they may be able to just go and do it on their own. And so, I think these types of activities, really, there's something for everyone. And I think that when you say recommending, I do recommend it to everybody.
Totally. No, I 100% agree. And there's some really cool stuff going on all around Michigan to get people more involved, whether it's esports or other hand cycling, adaptive things for even people who can't move their arms, move their legs. And so I think being inclusive is super important. And even I know this isn't necessarily in Michigan, but out in Utah, they have sip and puff skiing, sip and puff sailing, and hopefully that becomes more widespread. Some of the other things that we were planning to talk about was how do you get access to wheelchair and adaptive sports? And then how are these programs supported? I guess we'll start with Jocelyn. We'll bring you into the discussion. And you being the major gifts donor, how do we support our sports program?
From an athlete's perspective, and then from a panelist perspective, we have been incredibly lucky to be part of the Mary Free Bed program, or even what was Grand Rapids Wheelchair Sports. The program lends some support for travel, because whether if you're on a basketball team, or if you play more of an individual sport like tennis or hand cycling, if you're in Grand Rapids, you're not going to go play the wheelchair basketball team down in Kalamazoo, because there isn't one. The players that play adaptive sports, like, we pull from like the whole West Michigan area. So, when you have to travel with a team, it can get pretty expensive. So the wheelchair sports program at Mary Free Bed is 95% supported by philanthropy. And it's through a number of things. Some people just donate money because they like to support the program. We do a lot of grant writing. Some people even do things like, you've seen it on Facebook, like raising money for their birthday or something like that. But it does help when you have a couple foundations that support you at a pretty high level. And there is also some subsidy from the hospital itself. And athletes do pay for each sport that they play. As a tennis player, it's usually, I think, $100 per season per sport. So like Pat, for example, if he's playing softball and lacrosse that are right now, I believe he would probably pay for each sport. So athletes have.
Jocelyn, is that specific to Mary Free Bed, or is it always that you have to pay money to try or participate in some of
It is specific to Mary Free Bed. And let me just say, if you're interested and you want to try a sport or come out a time or two, like, that is totally, like, we wouldn't charge you $100 to even come out and try it or anything like that. But if you reach the point where you're like, okay, I want to play this seriously. And then we also have an athlete's assistance fund, because for some people, even that $100 is a barrier. So we want to be mindful of that too.
We also have a closet of equipment, not really a closet, it's a whole building practically, with equipment that we've obtained so that that's not a barrier to participation from our athletes. And, we're fortunate at Mary Free Bed, but I know not all places across the country have this ability. And so you just have to basically look in your community and see what's available. There's some programs that are able to provide even more than we provide, where nobody pays anything. And there's some programs where you're paying more. So I think it just varies from program to program.
And there are resources, like Rotary clubs, Kiwanis Club, like, there's a lot of small clubs or even churches or something like that, that may get together or, raise some money to purchase, a couple sport chairs or something like that. You're muted, John.
Sorry, I keep doing that. And so if people want to go about it independently, I've even had people do Kickstarters or GoFundMes to fund some adaptive equipment. And then people who play in, say, a power chair or their regular manual chair. And so there are other opportunities to get out and, say, play baseball or softball with your kids, or get out in the tennis court and use a manual chair. You don't necessarily have to have the specialized adaptive equipment to go out and play. So I don't know if Becky and Dr. Tinney, you wanted to comment on how getting involved in the costs of UMISH's program.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. Our program is completely donor funded. We have written grants and we've done fundraisers and golf outings and everything like that. We have been really grateful to be a part of Move United and get a grant through them, so it's just, that's pretty much how we've funded everything. We currently don't have athletes pay at this point. That was part of our mission, is that everything would be low cost for them, just because that was the need we recognized in the community. That could change, we're not sure right now, but that's kind of where we've landed. Mary Freebed comes up a lot in our conversations, and we talk about this like, oh man, it'd be great to be like Mary Freebed and have this great foundation, but we'll find those foundation people soon. But that's what we aspire to. But it's just, it is what it is right now, as we are, like I said, 5 years old, and is that right? Yeah, 6 years old. But it's a lot of work, but we've been really lucky ourselves too, and just that we've been able to sustain and grow, which it's a lot of hard work, a lot of overtime to do it, but we just keep plugging away with the development office and seeing what we can do. And I don't know, Melissa, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, so the question was, how does somebody kind of enter the space, or is it specifically equipment? Could you repeat it, Jonathan?
Yeah, so I was asking, how do you enter the space, and also some barriers or costs to entry?
So I would say most, as far as the programs that were described, equipment's already there for you to use and try. Now whether or not you have rental agreements or you can borrow something, on your own, if you're not able to, if you're not sure, I think that's the first thing. I never want anyone to try to invest or buy something that's the wrong thing until they've tried and had proper training and really know exactly, what they're, going to pursue. Then from there, it's really a decision on whether or not you would, apply for a grant or seek the funds like a GoFundMe, those types of programs. And certainly Move United, which is, a large nonprofit that supports adaptive sports programs across the country, does have some listing of current equipment grants that are available. You mentioned a lot of charity organizations in the community that do support it. Veteran service organizations are also big sponsors of adaptive sports external to the VA directly. As far as other barriers, I would say having, seen what's, available through the VA system versus not is a huge gap in access to equipment, because insurance doesn't cover recreation and sports equipment with regular durable medical equipment. So one thing I just do want to mention is that there are advocacy campaigns to try to change this. And so the state of Maine, the state of New Mexico, and I think there's a third one, and the state is escaping me, have actually written into law that insurances will provide up to age 18 and include very specifically in the definitions of equipment, sports and recreation. That's the first time that's ever happened. That's happened in the last year. There's a big campaign through the American Orthotics and Prosthetics Association. They have a campaign called So Kids Can Move, and now it's, I think, So People Can Move. So I wanted to mention that because there is a big push to try to change the landscape of what is covered, because that equipment access is a big barrier.
I also want to mention, someone put in the chat, the Challenge Athletes Foundation is a way that individuals can apply. And then the Kelly Brush Foundation is another one where individuals can apply to get equipment. So.
I
Very
think
nice.
the biggest thing to make sure you have a good letter of support for getting the equipment is that you show participation, you have, proper training, ongoing use of the equipment, that you have engagement in the activity. It will strengthen, your case because, they want to make sure that it's getting used. So I think that those are our tips to make sure, and even your providers, your healthcare providers can help you in a letter of support for that. So I think that that is one way that we as physicians can support that model if we're not able to prescribe it directly.
Yeah, totally. And I know in my clinic as well, I'm writing letters of support, following patients' progress in terms of attending. And then also another organization that I sometimes recommend people write to is the High Five Foundation. And I've seen people get like adapted mountain bikes with electrical assist, and go surfing, and wakeboarding, that sort of thing too. So there's tons of opportunities out there, and yeah, we should probably have a list that's attached to this, so that people can reference a lot of these names that we're talking about and post it on the website, because that's a great amount of resources that we should like hand out in clinic. So, anyways, moving on. I wanted to talk a little bit more with Pat and Jocelyn and just talk about kind of what excites you about wheelchair and adaptive sports and just recreation in general.
I know you're moving on, but would you want to talk about pricing at all for chairs and stuff?
Oh, yeah, I mean, we definitely, I think, yeah, sure.
Oh, okay. Just because you're talking about all the funds and how to raise money and everything. So I know I talked to some people and I think, oh, a chair was about $300-400, but it's like way more than that. It's usually a sports chair goes anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000. So it's a pretty expensive thing. So that's why it really helps to have these organizations that have them, that you can use them. And especially when you first try them out, you don't know what you really want or what you need or how to set up in them. So it's really good to use the ones that you can for free and then maybe buy your own later, and then you can get funding or through the grants and stuff like that. But they are really expensive. And I've seen a lot of chairs where it's not measured very well. So that is a big difference on the way you play sports too. You can get a chair that's not measured right, or things are just wrong, and it's not going to help. Just the way the chair is measured is, I think it helps quite a bit. I don't know if I said that in my thing, but I own the DME company, so I'm always sending John scripts to sign for people and say they need wheelchairs, and he's really supportive for that. So, but okay, I just wanted to mention that real quick to show.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Pat. And yeah, so that's why we really want to look for that commitment, because if people are just going to put it in the closet, like the rowing machine I have in my basement, then people aren't going to support that. So, good. So I guess any other questions or points that you guys want to address before we move on?
You mean move on or answer
Move
the
on.
question that you asked?
Yeah,
Or-
answer the question that I asked originally, which
All right.
is what, Jocelyn, what excites you about wheelchair and adaptive sports?
So when I first started, like the very first sport that I tried, well, it was probably water skiing. And there are not a ton of women that play adaptive sports. We actually are lucky here in Grand Rapids that we do have quite a few female tennis players. But I remember a woman, like, she hounded me to try tennis for years. I'm like, okay, fine, fine, I'll try it. And what excited me and what kept me coming back is breaking a sweat for the first time or getting my heart rate elevated from a sport. I mean, yeah, water skiing is exciting, but you're not getting your heart pumping in the quite same way as you do pushing a chair around a court. The opportunity to try a variety of different sports. I only have so much time in the day and the year. So I've pretty much stayed with tennis. I have tried pickleball, but with something like tennis, you find ways to integrate it, and it is one of the most integrated sports. I mean, and I often play with able-bodied people. The only rule difference is we get 2 bounces. But when there is a new sport to try, like, it sounds very challenging, but I would give lacrosse a try. But being around, I have made some really, really great friends. And if you do travel to other tournaments and you get to meet people from across the country or even in the world, I mean, it does offer far more than just some exercise and competitiveness. You meet lifelong friends, and especially for kids that get involved, that they may one day have a college scholarship and go play an adaptive sport for college. So there's that.
Wonderful.
Pat, excited you.
So, excites me. I guess I kind of like starting the new sport. So like I first started with basketball. I played that for a while. Then I had twin boys, and I thought, well, tennis would be fun because then when they get older, I can play tennis with them. And so I was playing tennis for a while, and then we started off softball. Softball was a lot of fun. I play that right now. We got a tournament this weekend in Chicago, and then I just started lacrosse. I played 1 year, and I was off a year and started again this year. Lacrosse is a lot of fun. It's challenging for me. It's pretty much like anything in a wheelchair. The first time you really stink at it, and the second time you stink a little less. And then you start getting better, and I mean, it's just everything you do. It's always the first time is always the hardest, and you kind of learn from it, and you just like to see yourself get better. As you get better, it's more fun. It's one of the things too is you do get to meet people. So it's not, you go to these tournaments and all these different places, and it's a lot of fun because we get to travel, and organizations help a lot with traveling. Traveling is really expensive too, but with the funds and all that stuff that they support, that makes it so it's possible to travel. As far as, and then when you're there, you get to, I mean, after the games, it's not all games and you go to bed. I mean, then you get to go eat with people, and you get to go do things, and it's kind of fun. One of the things I know Jocelyn said, you get to meet people. So I started coaching a long time ago with little kids, and that's what I coach. I still coach them now, the 7 to 13-year-olds. So what's really fun was one of the kids I coached, they were like 8 and 9 years old when they started. And then just last year, I was sitting at the bar with them. So it was it felt really weird because they're 21 now. And then it's this kind of weird thing, see them sit across you drinking a beer. But it's but the reason I brought them up though is because they met when they were like 12, 13 years old, and they just got engaged last week, I think. So they just got engaged. So I thought that was pretty cool. So it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. In terms of just getting out and meeting other people, I know it was one of my first exposures to going out with the team after practice and going to Buffalo Wild Wings. And I was only 16 at the time, but so I wasn't drinking any beers yet, Pat. But we did have a lot of discussions, and I learned a ton from the players. And And that's what sparked my interest and made me go into spinal cord injury medicine. And so that's what it excites me, because it gives people an opportunity to get into the community, develop new friendships, and increase your heart rate too. So I guess we'll talk a little bit more about, so we've talked a lot about kind of national resources, access to wheelchair and adaptive sports, some of the other programs that are offered. I guess from a physician's perspective, what some of the dangers of sports are, but also how do we try and prevent injury. And so I guess I'll start just briefly with when I'm talking to some of the future players, I talk about starting gradually. Overuse injuries are one of the most common causes of people to stop playing. If you start off playing an hour or two a day, you're going to start to get pain. And so starting off just going out and trying to strengthen, I think is important, and not going super ham the first time you get out there. But also shoulder preservation. And when I go skiing and I'm skiing moguls, I think of each mogul as kind of a heartbeat. And so trying to think about preserving your shoulders for the future is a big deal in spinal cord injury, because they weren't necessarily meant to propel you for the rest of your life. And so working on rotator cuff strengthening and making sure you strengthen the muscles around the joint so that you can really try and prevent some of those overuse injuries, I think is one of the biggest things that I focus on. And then for some of the people with higher level injuries, I'm thinking about thermoregulation, which is like when you're out on a hot day and you have difficulty with sweating, making sure you have ice, you have a spray bottle, so that you can stay safe while you're out in the heat. And then Dr. Tinney, did you have anything that you kind of commonly see in terms of sports injuries and things that you recommend?
Well, so you kind of talked about musculoskeletal injury, talked about thermoregulation. I would say additionally, skin preservation. So any interface to your equipment, you just need to have that extra level of awareness, because you have sweat, heat, moisture, friction, collision, whatever's happening, with that interface. You just need to be aware of it, monitoring it, making sure, just have an extra level of vigilance with that. And that means that you should really, be inspecting your equipment, being really aware of that. The other thing that I would say, and also kind of, because I think a lot of schedules kind of get thrown off, especially if you're in a multi-sport event or multi-day competition. So one thing that I would say with traveling too is bladder and bowel management, and really how that can get really thrown off with travel and competition schedule. So if you are in an environment where you're upping your fluid intake, that cathing regimen would also need to increase as well. And just being mindful of how those things can change as you're participating.
Now, there is a question about participating in part of general events and asking them to be adapted. How would that work? Are there any responsibilities, inclusion specialists? What are best practices? Or just thinking, I want to do something with my family and friends. How do I get involved in the events that they're doing?
So in terms of integration into, at least from a tennis perspective, a USTA league, there's and maybe actually Jocelyn, you can speak more to this because I think you've done it, right?
Yes. So for USJ travel team, I've played on a 3.0 women's able-bodied team for a number of years. I usually play with a standing player, and I get 2 bounces to the ball if I want it. And so it's a matter of finding an activity that can be adapted, like some of the juniors, they play on their high school tennis teams in a chair. And the same thing, they just get 2 bounces to the ball if they want it. Granted, something like basketball, more challenging because you're not going to have one kid in it, one person in a chair where everybody else is running around. But you know, family activities, maybe biking or kayaking, or you know, there's golf, that there's pickleball. You know, pickleball is becoming a very popular sport, and people can have a lot of success with it early on. So I mean, I say, you know, like look at the activity and see how, you know, what challenges, what physical challenges someone may have, and what could be modified or adaptive if you want to make it a group activity.
I know, like, I know U of M has a strong program in the collegiate side, correct, with track and field. So I think that you do have to just kind of look at what activity you can't play like a team sport. You just can't intermix everybody with people in chairs. But the individual sports definitely, especially the hand cycling. We have a Bikes for the Rest of Us program at Mary Free Bed, which offers assistance and funding for adaptive bikes. And that's a huge opportunity where I know a lot of families come because they want to be able to go on a bike ride with the family member who has a disability. And an adaptive bike is a great way to do that as well.
Yeah, and I would just say that in terms of adapting anything, in Maria was kind of touching on it with the biking, anything with the family, actually everybody was, anything with the family, it's just a matter of the person who needs the adaptation, you know, figure out the activity they want to do, figure out, you know, what you need to do to adapt it, and then have the family just kind of go along with that adaptation. And if there's a clinic in, you know, your area, or you can YouTube it. I mean, there's so much you can do to YouTube to figure out how to adapt things. And then maybe the family can go along with that. I mean, there's just a lot of education out there if you're figuring out how to adapt something for the family. In terms of like your typical summer activities, camping, biking, kayaking, you know, figuring out, you can get really expensive adaptive equipment for kayaking for people. Like we have stuff for people up to like a C3 level, or you can just get pool noodles and, you know, towels and, you know, stuff like that for somebody with your own kayak who's maybe a lower level. So it's just a matter of like how creative you want to be, how much problem solving you want to do, to make it an enjoyable day for the whole family.
But I think if you can do one-off clinics or get some exposure together, that we do a lot of education for families. And I'm sure at Mary Free Bed, same thing, you know, so, you know, the families feel confident in how they can support their family member too.
Yeah.
So I would encourage that if you're not exactly sure what you want to do.
So one thing that I started though was last year, or around there, was the pickleball, like Jocelyn was saying. Pickleball is it's like the future of everything, I think.
It's the fastest growing thing in America.
Yeah, but you know why? It's because anybody can play. You can be in a wheelchair, you could be stand up, you could be 400 pounds, you could be 30 pounds, you could be 10, you could be 80. I played an 80-year-old guy that was better than almost anybody else I've played before. But it's just nice because the only difference in wheelchair is you get 2 bounces, and like a lot of times I just go to the Y like once a week, and you just jump in with a group of people. You don't need to find a friend and go there. You just throw your paddle in, and then when it's your turn, you go up, and then they look at you in a wheelchair and they think, well, what are you doing? Well, the first thing you just say, I get 2 bounces. But then first thing I always say is, hey, don't be nice to me, because a lot of times they'll just give me a little tap and then I'll just whack it at them and say, oh, okay, I guess. But it's but you can be pretty competitive in that sport, so I like it.
Yeah, and that's one thing I'll mention. When I first started coaching and playing with the wheelchair tennis team, I was oftentimes feeding balls, and everyone was like, "Thank you for not being nice. Like you really push us." And I think it just allows people to kind of see past the wheelchair and to really become part of a great community and really help in terms of building that those relationships, and also a passion for sport and competitiveness too. And then also just spending more time with your family and kids, if that's what you're looking for. So
Can you talk about that other side of the model? We talked about just health and recreation. In the last few minutes, can you talk about that national landscape and Paralympics and kind of, and I know collegiate activities were mentioned too and such.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I know Dr. Tinney definitely had some thoughts on that too. In terms of collegiate sports, I know UMich has a program. I helped Gene Orlando, who's the men's head tennis coach, start a tournament over at Michigan State. And we've traveled all around the country with Grand Valley's team. So I'll pass it to you, Dr. Tinney, though.
Oh, I was gonna say, if if people have a, desire to reach, larger competitive levels, there are a lot of national competitions, depending on the sport that you're looking for. I would say look at Move United as one of those resources to reference as to what is being hosted around the country. There are definitely regional and national competitions in a variety of sports that are on there. I also think, obviously, if for any veterans who are listening, the VA offers multiple national sports events opportunities. Also, when you're thinking about the pathway to, say, elite levels like the Paralympics, obviously it starts with that first exposure, learning, getting exposed, just being involved, learning what you love. And then I think that one way to reach out, if you're not exactly sure what programs are in your areas, is looking at the regional resources, reaching out to them, because certainly existing collegiate programs might be able to guide you in training. Our program here at the university is welcoming of non-students to help provide some coaching, instruction, and participation. So I think that is one, I think a lot of programs would be open in that way. And then another resource would be looking at your national governing bodies of the sport that you might be pursuing. And a lot of those would be listed either on the USOPC website or even on Move United, I would imagine too. So certainly a lot out there that could help you figure out, what direction to take.
Wonderful.
Wow.
And so I guess we have 1 minute left. Sorry, did somebody say something?
Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, so with our 1 minute left, I just wanted to thank all our panelists for being here and all the knowledge and resources that they've given us. In summary, I think there's tons of opportunity for anybody to play, and whether that's playing catch with your family out front, or all the way up to the most elite levels of Paralympics. It's never too late to get started, and I think just reaching out to the Michigan Model Systems website will post some resources for wheelchair and adaptive sports, and then also just talking to your physician or your local resources, I think is a great way to get involved.
And I just want to thank Dr. VandenBerg and all of the panelists. And thank you all for attending this Michigan Spinal Cord Injury Model Systems event. We look forward to having you involved in future presentations and events. Thank you and have a great night.